May the 18th, 2025. The scriptures this morning are from Isaiah and the Gospel of Mark. You can see them in the notes. I invite you to read them as we get started. Today, standing in front of us is a story of a woman who argues with Jesus. He is teaching and healing, and he needs to get away, and this woman with this big mouth won't let him get away. And this is one of those texts that ministers kind of avoid sometimes. We do that. We would much rather tell happy stories. We would much rather talk about non-controversial things. I could have chosen the Hebrew scripture. The prophet Isaiah was great. The Psalm this morning was great. But I kept coming back to this story about this woman in Mark's gospel. And I asked myself, can I avoid her? Can I avoid telling her story? Because Jesus couldn't avoid her. And the truth is, she is us. She is voicing things with Jesus that other people have not voiced. Now, Mark was the earliest of the four Gospels. It always feels urgent, immediate. The writer has no time to waste, no time for flowery introductions or elaborate backstories, no histories here, no begats. If you knew Jesus was coming back, but 15, 20 years later, maybe you would wonder what's taking so long. You might wonder if God forgot, and you want to just get this story out there. So Mark's gospel speaks to a community that feels left out and forgotten and abandoned, and they're a little bit gun shy. So Jesus, this radical, loving, healing, boundary-breaking teacher, had come and gone, and they weren't sure if any of it had been real, and so Mark writes for them. And he writes for himself, probably, to remind himself and all of them, don't give up, don't lose heart, and believe. And so Mark tells these stories in a really rushed but compelling way. And today he draws imagery from Isaiah 35. Be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. God will rescue you. Now, remember what Jesus did, and remember who you are in light of what he did. Remember who you are in light of his life and death and resurrection. And stories like this represent us. Mark's about halfway through telling his story. He portrays Jesus as completely exhausted, needing a break. He's been at it nonstop. Baptism, temptation, calling disciples, healings, teaching, parables, more healings, more teaching, more parables. And even when he tries to sneak away, he ends up walking on water and feeding thousands of people and confronting his critics and more healings. And he's just exhausted, and he's just dead on his feet. And he goes all the way to Tyre, into Gentile territory, to get away. And the text says he could not escape notice. Isn't that the way it goes when you care for people, when you live love 24/7, when you commit to something big? People in caregiving professions talk about the fact that they just can never let things go. You can't leave it at the office. It stays with you all the time. And I am sure that Jesus felt this way. Plus, all the stories going on around him and all the people talking about him and all these people following him from place to place, even if they're just looky-loos and don't understand any of it or don't know who he is, you attract attention, and it's exhausting. And he got tired. And then this woman shows up. This woman, this Syrophoenician woman, the only descriptor is Syrophoenician, which denotes a nobody, a nothing, and worse than nothing. That title for her says that she is damaged goods, she is irredeemable, she is unlovable, unloved. No husband, no family name, no status, and she dares approach Jesus alone. Are you kidding me? In private? Everybody knows that's wrong. And she kneels at his feet. Mark just told a story about Jairus doing the same thing, kneeling before Jesus, recognizing who he is and kneeling. And she begs. This woman begs. She has the audacity to beg. Not for herself, but for her little girl, her daughter. And Jesus says no. Jesus says no. Worse than no. He uses a metaphor, a descriptor, comparing her to a dog under a table. And the under here is important. This is not just a dog out doing dog stuff. This is a dog cowering under a table. A dog in the shadows, disgraceful, dishonorable. Don't you know who you are? No, not even that. Don't you know what you are? Jesus says. And if we're honest, we do not care for this kind of Jesus. We read this story and we cringe. We don't like short-tempered Jesus, tired and dismissive and rude. We want the Jesus who has time for us, the Jesus who listens and has compassion. Where is that Jesus? You are as a dog begging under a table, beneath where everybody else is. But the woman doesn't flinch. She doesn't accept his answer. She stands her ground. Sir, even a dog under a table eats the children's crumbs. I know who you are, Jesus. I know there's enough of you to go around. This isn't what you do, Jesus. This isn't who you are. You're not talking like yourself. You're better than that. You're wiser than that. You're more loving than that. And you kind of hearken back to Jacob wrestling with God, or Hannah pleading for a child, or Isaiah's people clinging to hope in darkness, Jairus in the synagogue. Like all of these before her, this woman speaks up for herself, but for everybody like her. And Jesus changes his mind. He does what he does because she refused to let him be less than who she knew him to be. He called her a dog. She called him out on his character. And she was right to do so because she had been mislabeled by him. And he was kind of mislabeling himself in his exhaustion. I mean, we can give him a break maybe. No, she didn't. Jesus, this isn't who you are. Be better for me and for you. And he does. Right after this woman is another story. Right after this woman comes a man who can't hear, who can't speak. Isn't that interesting? The story before about the woman is her speaking and testifying on her behalf, right? She speaks up. This man can't speak up. He can't hear and he can't speak. His friends bring him to Jesus and they know where to go. They've heard the stories and they beg him to just touch him. Just touch him. And Jesus does. No argument, no labeling of this man as less than. Jesus touches him and he hears and he can speak. And Jesus turns and tells everybody who witnessed it, keep your mouth shut about all of this. And the man speaks up and testifies what Jesus did, and all the witnesses do the same thing. They all speak up anyway. He told them not to, but they speak up anyway. These two stories are grouped together, which I think is a clue of how we're supposed to hear them. When your world is opened up, when your life is transformed, when things go from silent to sound. Silence is not an option anymore. When your life is transformed, silence is not an option anymore. This woman teaches us that when love is on the line, you have to speak up. Mark's gospel is a gospel of urgency, immediacy, this story of the inbreaking of God's kingdom into history, cracking open history. And for Mark, it's happening right now, and they're in the midst of it. And these stories are not just about faith, not just about this esoteric thought of believing in the greater good. They're about confident, audacious hope when you have been silenced, when your world has been silenced, when things are not going your way, when you're a people walking in darkness. It's the audacity of hope. This kind of faith, this kind of hope that's not saying, well, just in case. It's demanding, it's expecting, it's believing and anticipating, knowing that God can and will change things for the better. In a sense, Mark is speaking up through the characters in his story. The woman speaks up, the man speaks up, the gospel is proclaimed and told, and the world is changed, one person after another person after another person. Transformation, transformation, transformation. And if your world is different because of the gospel, if your life is different because of your faith in Jesus, in your awareness of what God did through his life, death, and resurrection, then God invites you through all of these stories to speak up. To speak up. See, in times of uncertainty, when people can't disagree without being disagreeable, when we fear for our own interests more than we love our neighbor, in a time of uncertainty, when children are hungry right down the street, when we'd rather categorize than embrace other people, when we'd rather talk about than talk with, when the news always seems to have an enemy, someone who's an other, but when we know darn well there is no them, there is only us, we have to speak up in those times. If we are being silenced by someone else, we have to speak up, and we have to expect God to get involved. We may be fearful people, but we're still God's people. We may disagree, but we cannot disregard. We may walk in uncertainty or darkness, but we will walk toward the light of Christ. We may see only differences, but we will remember that we are more alike than we're unalike. We may not understand another person's values, but we will value them still. We may be too tired, too exhausted to care, but we're going to care anyway. We may think what we do doesn't matter, but we're going to commit to doing it anyway. We're going to commit to loving one another again, and then do it again, and then do it again. And if someone else is being silenced, we're going to speak up on their behalf. For if God has loved us, even us, as we are, how can we not return that kind of love to God's world? We are brothers and sisters, y'all. We are brothers and sisters, bound by love, in the love, for the love, for the love. So when you get a chance, speak up. Speak up.